So on that, with Kavanagh's role, there's a spare man out for overlaps. And when Cavanagh was on the field, Derry got through easier. They have an extra man. You're playing with 14. I've said it last year. And it was obvious yesterday. And I think Mickey Hart took Cavanagh off yesterday. He wasn't playing well. He was rushing out and fouling people out of his role. That role is massively outdated.
The GAA Hour is sponsored by Paddy Power. For exclusive content from their GAA ambassadors and other high-profile contributors, check out news.paddypower.com.
So what a start to the Sunday game last night, lads. Did you watch the Sunday game? I watched the Sunday game.
I'm not a great follower. I saw the football highlights.
It was a fantastic start. It started off with RT staffers, some Sunday game employees telling us how great the Sunday game has been down through the years, and currently, like, I nearly fell off my seat and said, what is going on here?
Your tweet backfired. I wasn't planning on watching it, and then I saw you tweeting, giving out about the intros. I thought I better go watch it now.
Oh God, it was just weird. There's no self-awareness there at all. Imagine you're doing an intro of telling everybody how great your job, a job you're doing. Anyways, that was it. Having said that, the football highlights were excellent because they were critical of that. You couldn't fault the show outside of that. They showed a full hour of football and showed highlights from every single game. Some of the reports were better than others. I thought the last fella, I hadn't heard him before, the loud Wexford one, he was like Father Stone, but the actual content of what he was saying was really good. So it was a weird one. I'm actually looking forward to hearing more from this fella because he gave a good kind of summary of the actual game, you know. But they showed good highlights, and if you got an hour of football like that, you see the thing last night, it was good highlights because they didn't focus too much on any game. So say if there's a big game, Mayo and Kerry, that will take up the 25 minutes and then all the other gets the shit at the end, whereas all the games got kind of equal footing last night, and I think a lot of people prefer most of the games getting equal footing like that.
Well, I certainly do anyway. I like to just see the action from the games, because if you've been at a game yourself, you sometimes you'd like to hear a bit of analysis on it from a different opinion on it, but most of the time you just want to see action again from the game, you know, and to see the highlights and some of the good scores from a lot of the games. Like it's interesting sometimes you see a highlight reel and then they'll show an exceptional point in the analysis that they didn't even show in the highlights, and you're saying, lads, like, would you not just show, you know, the majority of the scores here? You know, it often happened over the years where you'd have played in a game and you'd have thought about something that was a brilliant piece of play or a brilliant score in a match, and then it wasn't shown in the highlights. Now look, that's partly irrelevant, but it just shows sometimes it's a very difficult task to put these things together. But my personal preference is more of the action on display and less talk.
Yeah, and especially with going back to Tomás O'Shea and Joe Brawley about games they haven't seen and them having the bullshit, they're still doing that, which I hate. Like, I mean, I said it to Declan Bennett here when I had him in here. I says, just do in the highlights, have a pundit, say Meath Offaly, have Keane or Anthony Miles or someone down on the pitch afterwards with the reporter, give a quick brief summary, 2 minutes to camera on where the game was won and lost, the big kind of talking points, and that's contained in the package. Then you don't need Tomás O'Shea and Joe Brawley trying to bullshit about a game that they hadn't
service,
seen. Well, it's not. That's not a critique of the two lads.
No,
because
absolutely not.
I'd be the same.
It's
You'd
impossible
just
to watch that amount of games in a given day, really.
Yeah, especially when Tyrone Derry was probably the focus, and that was probably the only one they would have seen, you know. But like, I mean, Limerick and Tipperary, this was the big one. Like, I mean, Division 4 teams acquitted themselves really well. There's no doubt about that. Limerick being the big one. Liam Kearns was very honest in his assessment after the game, I thought. Like, I mean, he said, you know, they were well beaten and they were beaten fairly and squarely, and made sure to add in that they had some great high points. You know, that's just normal manager talk, making sure he's not just completely going down on himself. We've had loads of high points while I've been here. But I thought Billy Lee was interesting that he was on Liam Kearns' backroom team when they did really well at Limerick, which adds that bit of extra spice into the game, which I didn't put Billy Lee into that backroom team at all. But anyways, and Billy Lee's an interesting enough character, so he is. Like, I mean, he was talking about his backroom team, so it's full of people from Limerick. So they had Paddy Cassan last year, and Paddy Cassan seems to be doing the rounds because he was with Clare, and then he was with Limerick last year, and then he jumped ship to Tipperary. So Billy Lee was like, listen, we're going all Limerick. He said we have a tendency to go looking for outside people, but we have people in Limerick that are every bit as good as those who people think are better outside the county. And there's an obsession about this. We talked about this on the show before. A coach from another county is better than coaches in your county, or a physical trainer is better than the physical trainer, and they're not. Because in the other county, they're thinking the exact same thing about the fellas in your county, especially physical trainers. There's very little between all of them. Like, I mean, obviously, and then you have managers from another county. All of a sudden, these lads suddenly have a mystique about them and they're better. They're not, you know? Like, I mean, I think the first port of call should be an appointment within your own county. Number one, it's much cheaper. Number two, to have a massive interest in how the club game is run, you know, how they basically care about the county, you know what I mean? So, like, I mean, I thought that was a good one. They have Brian Begley in as their coach, who obviously he was a dual player back when Limerick were really strong.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point because oftentimes it's just a lack of self-esteem really from people, and they're always looking externally to see, oh, there must be something better. And look, there are occasions where, you know, there's maybe a specialist coach or somebody who's a particular expert in a field that can add something to it. But I would always be in favour of going and sourcing that expertise in the short term and upskilling internally within the county and bringing people on in that way, rather than appointing somebody to a role in a county and then they jump ship again to another. You know, there's a lot of coaches have moved to a number of different counties, and I'm sure they're excellent, but I don't see how that is of a long-term benefit to the county itself, because it's not sustainable, you know, probably paying out big money to people when really a short stint of time with somebody coming doing a bit of coaching, and the coaches that are there can pick up on a lot of the stuff and then start to implement it themselves.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And he's one of the few managers at the start of the year that was on my wavelength about the new rules. Billy was just like, here, listen, this is what we have, we're going to play within them. So he wasn't spitting the dummy. I remember thinking at the time, we're going to get Billy on the show. I didn't get him on today because there's probably too much to talk about. We'll get him on again before the Munster semi-final.
Yeah, that's what Cian's saying as well, though. Sorry, it's similar to clubs when you bring an outside club manager. Like, it's not sustainable for the long term, because the outside club manager knows he's going to be there for 2 or 3 years and probably hoping to get a better job, so he doesn't care about the development that's going on from under sixes the whole way up. He's going to play his way for 2 years and get the hell out of there.
Yeah,
you know, and it's sort of similar. And I'm not saying that's happening with everybody, but there is that mystique around people from beyond where you're from.
Definitely was. Cian, you were in Navan yesterday, so, like, I mean, I called this last Thursday. I called the result. I said if there's going to be a shock, it'll be that one in all of the games, and it almost was. Like, other than a fluky goal, which was an attempted point, which was kind of against the wind and curled back. Where the hell was the goalie going? We see this happening all the time. Why go out there and contest that? Like, I mean,
to be honest, look, Meath didn't deserve to win the game. Offaly should have won the game. They dominated the game for much longer periods. They missed a good few chances. Look, Offaly blew it. Offaly had the game in their hands and they just couldn't get over the line. They kicked too many wides from reasonably decent scoring positions, and their goalkeeper made what is I suppose when you lose a game like that, it's a catastrophic error.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian McMahon is the player who contested with him. Brian McMahon is he 5'7", 5'8"?
He's not big, no.
And he's light. He's not a physically imposing player. And the ball drops in, and he knocks it away from the keeper, and then pats it into net. Like, it's just, you couldn't script it. Like,
how often do we see that though? I mean, why are goalkeepers coming out? Because what's the risk and what's the reward? So the reward is you come out and fist that away, maybe, or you come out and catch it. But what's the risk? You're leaving a palm into an empty net. There's no. You're like any fullback worth his salt should be able to sort that problem out.
But on this particular incident, I cannot understand for the life of me how the keeper did not win the ball or not get clear. Yeah. There's no logic to it. Brian McMahon was standing underneath the ball. The keeper was coming with momentum.
Yeah.
The keeper is probably 6 or 8 inches taller than him. He's probably 3 stone heavier than him. How does he not win the ball?
No,
it's just
unbelievable.
He just misses it in the air. And again, like, Meath were blessed. It was a nice bit of play for me to get into the position for James Conlon. And I mean, he's looking to kick the equalising score. And really, it's a bad miss.
Yeah.
And Meath just poxed it. Like, it was a real Liverpool type of thing based on the season they had. Just pure fluke that somehow gets them over the line, and then they go on again. So, and after the goal went in, despite the fact that there was 5 minutes of injury time, and the goal was scored maybe with 8 minutes to go, I think. Offaly just completely gave in at that point in time. They seemed to totally just give up. And if they had kept playing, they still could have won the game.
Even after the goal went in.
Even after that, because they still had enough attacks to get enough scores to win the match. They played a few sort of aimless balls in, but they weren't even hotly contested inside, you know. So it was just one of these where the goal went in, and Offaly were probably after putting huge energy into the game. Were very tired at that point in time, and that just knocked the wind out of their sails. But they still got back into it and could have snuck the game even by clipping points at the end, because
Offaly are decent though. Like we said, they were in a fake position in the league because they threw away so many points, so they were better than the position they had in the league. Mahon has them playing a nice brand of football, right? So they're a footballing team. Like
a lot of really good kick passing. They spread the game really well. Their wing forwards hugged the sidelines. Their half backs were good. Their corner backs were moving forward on the attack when the occasion was there. So they went after the game. They left 3 full forwards in the full forward line, that, you know, for the entire game almost, and they dominated. Where they were really good, which was where Meath couldn't get a grip on it, was Offaly won, I'd say, every single one of their own kickouts. So Meath could never get a foothold in the game, because anytime they'd go up and get a score, Offaly would win their own kick out. They'd retain possession, and they were all good on the ball. They'd kept it nice and wide, and they were able to work the ball up the field. So Meath were always sort of chasing the game. So, like, Andy McEntee made some, you know, a fair comment after the game when he said that it was the type of game over the last number of years that Meath have been losing, and they've had a lot of games like that during the league. You know, you often ask me why am I not raving about Meath, for good reason, because they're somehow finding a way to win these games. Sometimes they're the dominant team and they don't blow a team away. Other times they're under an awful lot of pressure, the game looks lost, and they somehow find a way to win. Now sometimes it's because the opposition hasn't been good enough to just beat them, but nonetheless they've still won a game that, you know, they lost a game last year against Longford where they were more in it, you know, whereas yesterday they really didn't deserve to win the game and they somehow got over the line. And I don't know what they're doing that's so good. They're maintaining, I suppose, a sense of calmness and belief, you know, to somehow see the game out. And in fairness, they worked some reasonable scores near the end, but
there was a strong wind in it, wasn't there? Offaly hit 7 in a row in the second half.
A reasonably strong wind, which Meath Meath had a bit of a scoring burst just before half time where they got 3 points, and that seemed to put them in a fairly commanding half time position, 9 points to 6. And you were thinking, you know, the impression I would have is that this was a game Meath should be winning by double digits. So I was kind of thinking, look, Meath will have this with 10 or 15 minutes to go. This game will be over because Meath will grind them down. They'll get a few more scores. Then Offaly will have to commit more players to the attack, and Meath will hit them on the counter and maybe get a goal or two, and they probably win by 12 points. That was the impression I would have had at half time. But Offaly came out and I think they scored 7 points in a row.
Yeah.
Now some of that was you know, some poor play from Meath. Well, actually, the majority
of it
was
good flowing scores, right? Just on the highlights.
They got some brilliant scores around the middle of the field. Peter Cunningham, I think, got 2 from play, and Owen Carroll, I think, got 2 from play as well. Now, Owen Carroll had a brilliant game. They were just kind of dominant. The one thing about it is, as an underdog, they came in, they just played with a bit more aggression than Meath. Meath, it was as if they were maybe looking beyond the game, or something, even just subconsciously, that they just weren't. They weren't really at the pitch for the battle of it. And they never got to that level of intensity. The atmosphere at the game, it was kind of quiet and subdued. There was a better atmosphere at a lot of the league games. So it was a funny one. The team probably fed off that a little bit. But then again, they didn't get the crowd into it enough either. Yeah. It was only near the end of the game when Meath were behind and the crowd were starting to get a bit frustrated and thinking things weren't going to go their way.
Because there'd be a little bit of needle with Offaly and Meath, right? Now, there was a little bit around 97, 98 and that time.
Yeah, there was probably before some of these lads were born.
Maybe, yeah. But Meath had needle with everyone back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone seemed to have a problem with us, Wooly. I don't know what it was.
Andy McEntee said after the game, our ball retention was poor, our option taking was poor, and then we went through a phase where Offaly got some really good scores. I think we made it easy for them on a number of occasions. It was frustrating for the players as much as anything else. I think they expected higher things of themselves and they were frustrated. So he's kind of maybe shifting the blame a little bit over on the players. John Mahon said he was looking at the Meath bench and he sensed panic and they were emptying their bench really early and he thought he had them. He said we had them rattled completely. And he actually referenced the Meath bench, that he had them rattled.
Meath did bring on subs early in the second half, but most of the subs that came on made a difference to the team and they just injected a bit of something. I mean, even a couple of the subs that came on, Sean Tobin and James Conlon, they just got stuck. If they won a free or if they got a turnover, they, maybe give an Offaly player a bit of a shove or a bit of a shoulder, or let a bit of a roar into his face and get on with. So they were playing with a bit more fire. There was one incident along the sideline in the second half where the ball went over the sideline, and it was an Offaly sideline ball. 2 Offaly guys went over and they just threw the Meath man onto the ground and took the ball off him. Now the referee ended up throwing up the ball, but that'll give you an example of
setting the tone
for the thing. And Meath, they didn't take a backward step, but they weren't driving the sort of the levels that you'd expect. They weren't the ones imposing their will on Offaly. Offaly were the ones that were doing that to Meath. And this Meath team, unless they're doing that, they're really not. They're not good enough. They're not talented enough to be able to just play a certain way. They have to be foot to the floor, really aggressive, and taking that forward step and chasing the game. When they don't chase the game down, they're a very, very ordinary team.
Yeah, it's a weird one where the winners were probably more deflated than the losers coming out of
in many respects. Yeah, and Meath Meath really need to get it together, because that performance wouldn't beat Carlow, I would say. Based on Carlow's form, Carlow have had a nice long run into the game in 2 weeks' time. They'll be ready for it.
No management team.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that might affect them.
No midfielder, so they might be under a bit of pressure. I think they're still appealing that.
When you can focus on a game and a one-off match, players can elevate themselves beyond their average level.
Yeah. But where's that game?
It's in Tullamore.
It's in Tullamore, right? Okay. We'll see. Leitrim obviously the Leitrim Rising came to an abrupt end, Colin. So this is the feel-good story of the league. Acquitted themselves well in the league final. Then obviously the provincials draw them away from home against the Division 1 team this year. So when you look at it, and you can say Leitrim were completely naive. They played no sweeper. Now, most of the teams that did well against the Division 2-3 teams, most of the Division 4 teams all acquitted themselves well. But Division 4 teams are allowed go defensive against the stronger teams. Like Leitrim, to think they can go away to a Division 1 team, play no sweeper, stay wide open and beat them in a shootout, that's naivety of the highest order now.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about a Division 4 team. Sometimes it is just a bit of sense. There were some of the scores that Cox got for Roscommon, and it did look like he just had the freedom of the 45.
Oh, yeah. Even their goals, they're just waltzing through.
Yeah, I was thinking, is it just me because I'm from Ulster, or is this just stupid? Just get somebody standing in front of them, and unless they thought, because Ryan O'Rourke had a good game for them, unless they thought they could beat them in a shootout. I don't know, but
that's the thing.
Well, you see, look, goals change games. I mean, Leitrim had a goal chance, straight after the throw-in, which could have put them ahead, and then Roscommon ran in 2 goals that were fairly soft in that.
Yeah. Now, apparently Roscommon had a load of goal chances.
Yeah, I know, but only the ones that go in count. So,
but the Leitrim one counted, right? That they missed. Don't try to bullshit me here, Ward.
No, look, they had bodies back when Roscommon got their first 2 goals. So it wasn't as if they were totally exposed. I can understand it later in the game on the highlights when you see that they're chasing the match and they're already 6 or 7 points behind. They're going to be committing more bodies. So
yeah.
Look, they can count themselves maybe a little bit unlucky at the start of the game that they weren't able to stay in the game long enough. The game was probably over. When it's 2-4 to 2 points, the game was kind of over after about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's always very demoralising for the underdog.
See, my point of this is, Leitrim, they played their midfielder Shane Moran at full forward and pumped in ball to him, and we know their tactics this year. They have a style of play. It's lovely to watch. It's good direct ball in. It's running off that then. My point is that Leitrim should never really be playing Roscommon, because why should they have to change that nice style for a deplorable, a much more defensive style just to compete with them? They can't compete with them, therefore they shouldn't be playing them. That's the point of it. Somebody actually said to me recently, said that when they talk about a 2-tier system in football, there should be 2 tiers. 8 teams and the other 24, because the other 24, there is less between the other 24 than there is between the Division 1 and the rest. Do you know what I mean? And that's probably based on the games. Derry did really well against Tyrone. Now that's not backing up my point. That's a Division 1 team.
That was an anomaly, Wooly. Don't worry about it.
Limerick did very well against Tip, Division 4 versus Division 2. Wicklow against Kildare, Division 4 versus Division 2. Waterford against Clare, 4 versus 2. And Wexford against Louth, that was 4 versus 3. Do you know what I mean? And they all acquitted themselves pretty well. So I don't know. You couldn't split it 8 and 24. It would be just weird. But I can see the point they're making. There is the huge step up to the really good teams.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, look, you've made the point well. There's a lot of teams at a fairly similar level that on a given day, in Championship football, one team could beat another, and that's where, unfortunately, the backdoor system and the Super 8s, I mean, it takes away that sort of that shock element to it, because even as an example, if somebody in Leinster shocked Dublin in a given day in the Leinster semi-final, it wouldn't matter. Dublin still get to the Super 8s. So the chances for an underdog team to get a good run and to win a provincial or to win an All Ireland is that day is long gone, and it's purely because the knockout nature of it has been completely diluted, and that's a shame, really, because when you did have the opportunity for a straight knockout, and an underdog could win a game and then progress, and a really strong team doesn't have the opportunity to get back into it. I mean, that was why we had shocks over the years. That day is long gone, and it's why the Championship needs a full overhaul.
Yeah,
because it's sort of, look, a lot of these games, I mean, even the matches that we'll be talking about and analysing, you're kind of saying, oh, it was great, it was a competitive game between two teams and one team moved on, but look, none of these teams are going to do anything. Like, we won't be talking about them in a month's time, or 2 months' time.
Isn't that the same though in most competitions? Like, most of them aren't going to win it, realistically.
Yeah, but 20 years ago, 7 teams could win, 5 or 6 teams could win Leinster, 5 or 6 teams could win Ulster. Munster was pretty boring, and Connacht used to revolve around Roscommon.
But the thing,
that's a lot, though. That's a lot. Like, that's a lot from what we've fallen down to now. So we're talking Kerry, we're talking Dublin, 2,
but even
and then
if
we're
you
talking
look at
those 3, and then the Ulster is 3 teams.
If you take an example even of the Derry-Tyrone game, I mean, even if Derry had beaten Tyrone, I mean, Tyrone would have still found their way back into the system later on. Whereas in years gone by, that Ulster preliminary round game could contain the 2 best teams in the country, and it was a huge game where everything was on the line.
Yeah,
and that to me just makes it just takes it to a different level. So we need to find some way where we get back to a straight knockout cup competition. The whole thing needs, like, we talk about this all the time, but the whole thing needs to be restructured. If we're talking about the best teams playing each other regularly, which we want to see, but that's a league. Play that, later in the year, whatever. But we need to have a knockout competition where it's do or die. A proper knockout competition.
Yeah.
None of this backdoor rubbish, because it's waste time. Have your league as your main competition or whatever, or as a competition where you get all these games. But then come to a knockout competition whereby, there is a genuine chance of an upset.
The one that's jumping out to me is Monaghan beating Armagh. Was it a 2004 or 2003 after they won the All-Ireland champions, and they're out? Or no, well, they actually got back into qualifiers. But if they were out then, if Tyrone went a point down with 8 minutes to go with the chance of being out, Tyrone might not have come back at that. You know what I mean? There is that safety blanket. I do take that, and it does definitely takes away from the.
And it'd leave us more time for club football as well if they just ran the bloody thing off.
Draws mean nothing now as well, don't they? Like, when you get a draw in October to see who you're playing, it doesn't. Like, Derry got Tyrone, and you're like, right, we might get a run the qualifiers. You're not even thinking about the Tyrone game.
No, it's a pity. So, like I was saying, the other Division 4 teams did well. Wexford did very well against Louth for a long part of the game until they were kind of ran out of steam towards the end. Wicklow almost shocked Kildare, and Waterford almost beat Clare. And both of these games followed this same kind of pattern. Clare were 7-1 up. They failed to score after the 39th minute. It finished 9-8. Kildare led 12-5, and it finished 15-1-10, because they're in their comfort zone. They're going through the motions. They have the game won, and then bang! Suddenly a comeback is on, and you're not in the frame of mind to stop this comeback. And John Evans said after the game that if they got the goal a little bit earlier in the second half, they'd have won that game, which would have been an incredible shock.
Yeah, well, sometimes you can be involved in games and they're a bit funny. You kind of know you should be winning the game, and it can be very easy sometimes early in a match, depending on the opposition. Just randomly, that scores can become very easy. It can be really loose, and all of a sudden, the whole team just gets totally relaxed, and then players start taking the wrong options, and all of a sudden there's a massive momentum swing, and you just can't arrest the slide.
Because number one, this is the thing, so you have to get your head around being really strong favourites. So Kildare and Clare are 1-25, something crazy like that. So immediately you want to get your mentality right, get your focus right, hit this game hard, show them respect, all those things. So then you do all those things. So you're on the ball, and then you're on the field going, we did it, 12-5 up now, here we're coasting now. And during the game, it's very easy to switch off that level of intensity, because the game is won at 12-5 at a 21-25 shot. The next minute, a point, 12-6, goal, 12-1-9. Now there's 3 in it and the crowd's going mad and you're like, Jesus, I've just been daydreaming.
Yeah.
Like, this happens. Players are human beings.
And it's like, I can't believe we're in a game here. You're almost like you feel it's unfair or something.
And you just can't snap out of that kind of, lethargic attitude that you had where you might be trying one off the outside of your boot where you wouldn't usually. That kind of a way. Like, you're into it. I wouldn't call it even showboating, but it's maybe doing things you would do in training and not a championship game.
That's actually the key for like the favourites. That's what Dublin do so well, is that every half chance for a goal, you're just clipping it over, and you're always just getting a point on the board. And that's why Dublin demoralise so many teams, and why you never have a real sniff to get back into it, because every time they go up the pitch, they're just keeping the scoreboard going. It's sometimes boring, but they're doing it and it's effective.
Yeah, no, exactly. But Kildare don't have the same menace about them at all. Without, like, you take Paul Cribb and Daniel Flynn. Now, they're 2 All-Star nominations last year, and they're number 11 and number 14. That's what everything goes through. Cribben's an outstanding, scores from play. Flynn, everything goes through him. He's one out showing, and they work off him then. They're both gone. Fergal Conway was moved out of the forwards, who's their best working half forward, into midfield, and you had didn't even have Niall Kelly there as well. Like, I mean, there's no county can do without those. Like, it's a wishy-washy.
They're down an awful lot of talent.
It's a wishy-washy forward line there now. When you look through it, do you know what I mean? It's not at the level of a forward line that's going to be. Like,
it's very much unproven.
Yeah,
very much unproven. Like, I think Ben McCormack, I think, is an excellent forward, but he's again been in and out of the team with injury and different things, and he hasn't had a championship campaign. I've seen him play well against Meath on a number of occasions.
As a corner forward.
Yeah, and he's a very good scoring forward. But again, he's untested really in the heat of championship inter-county football. So you can't. Kildare are trying to rely on players that haven't. Unproven calibre, we'll say, and they don't have the experienced players around them at the minute with the injuries and different things. So they've definitely been significantly weakened. But you would expect them to improve, and obviously if Niall Kelly comes back into the team, he'll add something to them as well.
Kelly come back. Fergal Moulick came on as a sub. I think he has been out injured. He's been struggling with injuries, so Fergal Conway will go back into that forward line with Kelly. They're just down Cribben and Daniel Flynn at that stage, which are still Cribben as well. Like, he's a sensational year last year from scoring points from play.
Those guys are able to cause problems for the top teams defensively. Look, Kildare really are going nowhere this year. They're not. They're on the basis of current form, state of their squad, all those sorts of things. They're not going to make the Super 8 if they get anybody decent in the qualifiers, because Dublin are going to beat them.
I'd agree in the semi-final. Quickly, you're a free taker, Cian. Did you ever come across somebody kicking a free and then being subbed off and the free being taken again? That was a weird one, wasn't it? Did you see that? Like, I could hear his name. There was an announcement being made as he kicked it, unless he was like, no way, I'm kicking this before I'm walking off. But
no, I haven't seen anything
Adam
like
Tyrone.
that. I think it happened one time in a minor All-Ireland final or something. A substitute came on and he was taking the free.
That was a semi-final with us and Donegal. Yeah, they brought on a sub cold just to take a free over on the left-hand side, and he missed it, McLean.
Well, I always thought
the headline on the paper: Leash gain from McLean's pain. I remember. Sure, listen, you're only a young fella. It was McLean. It rhymed with pain.
Well, I tell you, Willie, I would have always advocated now if there could be special teams again. I'd be happy enough to just come on every now and again and kick the frees and back off
like
again.
American football. Just get on and get off.
Look, it is very difficult to just come into it and have something like that to get straight up. But sometimes it can be a nice thing. Now, it was a particularly difficult one for it was a decent way out for Flynn coming on. You'd be happy enough to come on and tap one straight in front of the goals over the bar and get you going. But quite an interesting one. I had it before in I think a Leinster semi-final against Kildare, where I took a shot and the referee blew the half-time whistle as the ball was in the air.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and there was quite a famous one years ago where
How did he
Bernard
explain
Flynn,
that? Did you? I'm sure you went over and politely asked him why he did that.
I tried to ask him politely, but Emmett Bolton had me around the throat at the time, so I wasn't able to push my way past. But there was a very famous one, I think, in '91 when Meath played Wicklow. It was after the saga of 4 in a row against Dublin, and Bernard Flynn kicked a shot near the end of the game that would have won the match for Meath. And I think again the referee blew the whistle as the ball was in the air.
Yeah, I've seen that. And never a free. There's no excuse for a free.
It's quite rare. Quite rare.
It's very rare. Yeah, and the referee has to be brought out in the boot of a car or whatever like that. Right. Okay, we'll be back and we'll talk about Tyrone and Derry. So Conan, you must be a proud Derry man today, considering all the years of hardship you've had to endure and down to Division 4, a point up with 7 minutes to go. Like, I would love to have seen your little face when that Christopher Bradley point went over.
We'll make a DVD of being a point up, 7 minutes to go. Yeah, like, you should have seen my face. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god, is this happening? And then of course 15 seconds later we were 2 points down, so it didn't last very long. But a good display, a good spirited display, more than I expected, and certainly more than what I heard the people around the county were expecting. So I think people were a bit sort of pumped after it, thinking, we could go on a run here now if you keep everybody together.
Well, they went very defensive against Tyrone, and that's understandable. Again, it's Division 4 versus Division 1, so they weren't going to let Tyrone get anything easy. They didn't give them up too many turnovers. There was no huge counter-attacking moves, which killed Derry the last few times I saw them. So tactically, they were a little bit smarter. And Tyrone often struggle. I heard them saying last night about defensive systems. Tyrone always struggled to break down defensive. Most teams struggle to break down defensive systems like that anyways. Tyrone especially. Tyrone blow teams like Cork and Roscommon away that just are stupid and give them turnovers in the 45. But all down through the years, Tyrone don't necessarily do very well against teams that don't give them, the turnovers that they want. So tactically, Derry, like, for me, got it spot on.
Yeah, well, they fairly predictable from Derry because they're the underdog going in. They have the players to play that way as well. I mean, nearly every time I played against a team from Derry, that's the way they played. They played very defensively, always had at least one sweeper, and tried to relied upon having a marquee forward or two up front that they could break and get scores with. And again, I suppose they're probably doing something quite similar at the minute with McGuigan being the one that's isolated up front more often than not.
Yeah.
Now, I know Ryan Bell is obviously a good forward as well, and Derry do have talented players that are able to kick scores from distance and win their own ball as well. They have a good bit of size to them. Probably a confidence, but strangely enough, like, it'll be a massive confidence builder for Derry.
They were deplorable now, you have to say, for the first 20 minutes. They were terrible. They only just played their way back into it. I think their system was highlighted best. There was one shot on camera. Obviously, you're not at the game, but it was a kick out, and McAtamney, the midfielder, have I pronounced that right? McAtamney, midfielder, caught it, and he got the mark, and he turned around and he tried to drill one low or a long ball into the forwards. And so you got the camera angle, and McGuigan was behind his man, but he was the only one down there, and that was from a kick out, where you would think maybe that Derry might have got their shape a little bit back. But so this was clearly Derry leaving pretty much McGuigan up on his own until maybe later on when they might have brought on Christopher Bradley or somebody like that.
Yeah, and they were very frustrating sometimes on the ball. Like, I get when you're trying to keep possession and you're keeping it out of the tackle and you're trying to slow the play down against Tyrone, but there's only so many times you can sort of come on the loop. Do you know, when a player comes off the flank and it comes on the loop, and then somebody else is coming from the inside, coming on a loop, then there's no point in doing it. You're going nowhere. You're actually staying in the same position.
Colin, on that, that's very much the way Slaughtneil have played anytime I've seen them, is very much possession-based game, ball through the hand, loads, players running back towards their own goal, carrying the ball, eventually trying to work the opening. Is the contingent of Slaughtneil boys, are they sort of is that the style they're trying to copy?
There was 6 of them on it, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's supposed to be 7, but they made a late change, but there's 6. Yeah, I'd say you're probably right. I'd say the smartness of it was certainly the Slaughtneil, keeping it away from the tackle and the contact. But I think what Slaughtneil do best, and it's what Derry did better in the second half, is they test boys. You see, who's got a soft shoulder and will go at him. Like Porry Cassidy did the best throughout the whole game.
He was very good,
taking men on.
He's an all-action midfielder. I like the look of him. And some of their best play was Endelin. In the first half, the only 2 good balls that were given into McGuigan was Endelin. One was to Bell maybe, the other was to McGuigan. 2 points came off it. Just like, these weren't anything special. They were just off the inside of the boot, giving it on the forward side. And he seemed to be prepared when it got far enough that he was willing to give it in.
And that was the interesting thing, because Tyrone did seem they were open at the back. You saw the first goal chance. Like, there was space behind. Like, Tyrone seemed to be pressing around the middle third, trying to sort of suffocate.
We know that's what they do now, yeah.
But there was space in behind, and Cian McFall got a really good score as well. I think it was Lynn that played the ball to him too.
It was McFall, not Bell. Yeah, it was McFall's point.
So there was space. Rocks obviously should have just popped that one across after the first minute, like a goal chance. That was like that's criminal. Like, that's the sort of drill you'll do in training over and over and over again, and just pop it across, and the man will palm it in, and the managers will have a wet dream about that sort of goal, but he just took it on himself. So that was just a bit of naivety on his part. But
Chrissy McCaig did the sweeper job. did fine. Carl McCaig man-marked Peter Hart, who wasn't in the game at all. Again, I'd be critical of Peter Hart a lot. Niall Sludden wasn't in the game. They dropped way too deep for Tyrone. This wasn't the new Tyrone this was a very conservative Tyrone, let's be honest about it. It wasn't a Tyrone that we were hoping to see. It was McShane being left up on his own. Matty Donnelly half-heartedly going to him but dropping back too deep as well. Not always being, especially against the win, Matty Donnelly didn't spend much time up beside him. And what's most disappointing for me was Sludden and Hart. They weren't anywhere near up close enough to and only for McShane's brilliance that it's able to get scores out of nothing. Tyrone didn't have much really, didn't they not? They didn't. And listen, let's be honest, if you're picking Frank Burns and Hugh Pat McGeary in your forward line, that's a fair old statement of intent from Tyrone as regards how they're preparing for the game.
Yeah, well, look, we know it is difficult when you come up against a team that plays in that sort of defensive block that Derry played in. So Tyrone, I suppose, weren't, more often than not, maybe they tried a few early on, but they weren't going to continue to try and kick ball in if they felt it wasn't on. Now, McShane, in fairness to him, made things happen. I would still be an advocate of having at least two bodies in there, because if you have a physical player like McShane, and it's where Tyrone have been lacking in recent years, you can still play the ball into him. Like he had Rogers really kind of beaten up a stick.
Yeah.
He had him every way.
Now the ball they give to him is outstanding.
Yeah, look, at times it's fantastic, but if Tyrone had just one more player that held their shape a bit more, like Donnelly or Hart, I think it's sometimes they see this massive defenders in there, and they either get demoralised or they lose patience because they can't get their hands on the ball. Like Peter Hart and Donnelly are players that in games they probably handle a huge amount of ball in a match. Like they're not really a natural inside forward who might touch the ball 5 times in a game and finish with 1-3.
Oh no,
that's not the type of player that they are. So sometimes when you play against a team like that, you need to just have that second body up there, because number one, it forces an extra, a defender to actually have a job to do as opposed to just covering his own, which they can do at their ease. And it means that if a ball does go in and McShane can't snap it up first time, or if he wins it and a second defender comes, he has somebody that he can play it off to.
Now, it was McShane's brilliance against a better, Rogers isn't usually beating up a stick like that, but McShane didn't win a ball really and lay it off to anybody. No. That's the disappointing thing. His own brilliance got him scores, and you can't count on that all the time.
No, not all the time. And that's kind of the point I'm making. Just have somebody that he could link with. Now look, Tyrone were playing against a team that you would say are based on league positions, all that sort of stuff, and previous campaigns are far below them in Derry in terms of calibre. So Tyrone didn't play to the same level of intensity that you would expect them to play to when they're playing in a big game. They were probably slightly off it, and I know you'll probably touch on it now, but the Colm Cavanagh thing, him back into the team, I don't know if that suits the way they're trying to play as well, Tyrone, because they're kind of caught between going man to man and aggressively pressing the opposition or dropping off into that defensive shell. And there were times where they didn't do one or the other, and that's where Derry were able to, by holding on to possession. It was like the whole, very well documented in the last week, with spot the dope, from the Liverpool-Barcelona game of taking things quickly. But it works in Gaelic football. If you just hold on to possession, somebody eventually switches off and a man can become free, because there's all it takes, if you're going man to man, all it takes is one man to not follow a runner, and the whole thing can open up.
But this is the thing now, sorry to cut you off, but Paul Flynn was in here last Wednesday. I don't know if you heard it or not, because I was very interested in asking him, because our theories on why are these marquee forwards running off after their men. So he went, we can't afford to leave a spare man and create that overlap. It'll pull our sweeper out of his position, because he'll have to come out, and tactically we're not prepared to give that extra man out around the midfield. Grand. So now I understand why they're doing it. Personally, I would say that's what your sweeper's for, and that he can come out and fight that fire, and you'll still keep your marquee forward fresh, right? So that's grand. But this is what I don't understand. If that's so important and all the counties are doing it, Tyrone, Colm Cavanagh is still dropping off his man and leaving a spare man out around midfield. Now, that's fine if the other team is playing a full-time sweeper. So Cavan will be a full-time sweeper and the other team will be conservative and they'll have their spare man back there. But that's not what teams are doing now, especially Monaghan against Tyrone. Monaghan won't play with a full-time sweeper because in their eyes, they'll be like, we'll get somebody back when we lose it, and they can filter back in there. But when we're attacking, we're all attacking. So on that, with Cavanagh's role, there's a spare man out for overlaps. And when Cavanagh was on the field, Derry got through easier. They have an extra man. You're playing with 14. I've said it last year. And it was obvious yesterday. And I think Mickey Hart took Cavanagh off yesterday. He wasn't playing well. He was rushing out and fouling people out of his role. That role is massively outdated. Dublin only free up Cian O'Sullivan if the other team is playing a sweeper. That's the only time Cian O'Sullivan will get free, if the other team is playing a sweeper. That's where the whole thing came from. So instead of Dublin pushing up on that other sweeper, they said to Cian, you stay back and you cover the defence. But if there's no sweeper on the far side, Cian O'Sullivan will be manning up on whoever's free. Because you can't afford to leave that spare man. But Tyrone are choosing to give the opposition a spare man because Cavanagh is doing that. They need to tell him to stop. It's ruining this game plan, and it's more highlighted now because they actually are trying to pair off one by one.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because Hampsey was in the Cavanagh role before Cavanagh came on, and Hampsey was destroying Derry in attack. Like, he was coming late and he was running at men and he got a score himself, and he was making things happen. And actually in defence, he was putting pressure on out around the middle, and Shane McGuigan got less ball than he did than when Colm Cavanagh was on, supposedly standing in front of Shane McGuigan as a sweeper. He was putting that bit of pressure on, stopped the ball coming in, and it was the same with Derry as well. When Brendan Rodgers, for the last 10-15 minutes, I don't know why it happened, of the first half, he went out and marked Matty Donnelly, and it sort of scuppered Cathal McShane a bit because there was more pressure on the ball that was coming in, and there's just that empathy. Like, there's a reward there if you go out and put pressure on the ball that's coming in, but Derry didn't do it enough, Tyrone didn't do it enough, and then Tyrone let Derry come in when they brought Colm Cavanagh.
Yeah,
it's weird.
If you're a running team like that and Enda Lynn is able to come into it, you're one off the shoulder, then you're the spare man, give, and you're going again, and then all of a sudden Cavanagh rushes out to this person and ends up fouling them, and it's like, why don't you just stop that?
His starting position is too deep, because if you're a midfielder dropping back, he's dropping back in almost to the full back position or close to it. It's designed around preventing goals. Most teams, if they're doing that, it's the centre half back, and all the centre half back does is he holds that zone.
That's it.
So he's still engaging the opposition out around the 45 metre line or just inside it, as opposed to having to rush forward 20 metres to try and make that tackle. And as a forward, what I always love to see is a defender sprinting at pace towards me.
Yeah.
Because you'd hold the ball out in one hand and take it back into your arm, and he's already gone 10 yards the wrong direction.
And they showed the analysis last night of McGuigan's goal and said, oh, Cavanagh used to be here. But Cavanagh was actually 2 seconds before that after rushing out to it. So, like, I mean, Cavanagh was in, like, it was like, I thought the point they were trying to make is Cavanagh was nowhere to be seen. He was there. He had rushed out stupidly. So I think he's all over the shop. Now, I know he's only back from injury, but I think he's all over the place. And I can't see why any good centre-back worth his salt can engage his man. And this is old school football. This is football back in the 90s, 2000s when I was playing. That, geez, I don't want to call it too old school like I'm an now lad. But the centre-back, a good centre-back worth his salt, will follow his man into midfield. And if he's not part of the play, he'll also drop back a little bit. Why is Colm Cavanagh doing that? Like, I mean, it doesn't make sense. He's leaving his own midfielder free. Well, so someone else then has to pick up that midfielder, then you're leaving a wing back free.
Yeah, but
somebody's free.
It always gives the opposition an easy out ball. And the worst is, I always found from playing, that the worst thing you could possibly have was your midfielders not really properly marking their man. Because you could have 3 or 4 or all 6 forwards really, really pressing aggressively and high and tackling really well and really pinning the opposition in, and then you just get this hand pass over your head and you turn and there'd be a midfielder there picking it up and your midfielder 20 yards behind him, and it used to infuriate me, drive me mad, because you're just saying, if you're playing midfield and a midfielder's dropping to get a little handy hand pass off the half back line, he cannot be allowed to turn. You have to be right tight to him that he's either not an option for the hand pass or that he can't get turned, so that you're forcing him back, and you're forcing him back to your forwards who can then tackle him again. It's lazy. I just consider it lazy play if you're trying to play that aggressive press, that somebody doesn't do their job.
Cavanagh will get, don't want people to be misled there, because Cavanagh will get involved in that aggressive press. He'd be out in midfield on his man.
And he'd be brilliant at it.
And he'd be good at that. But the minute that's not in a Tyrone hand, he's leaving his man and running backwards. Yeah. So that press, right? So he's given us one chance at this press. And we thought Tyrone had changed now, so they're pressing all over the field, which is great. It's what Mayo does, it's what Dublin does. So say if that kick out doesn't go to a Tyrone man or they don't turn over, it goes to a Derry man. That's when he abandons it and just heads back. So he's only given us, we've one chance at this press. No, you don't. You can press them right up to where to get to you up there and try and win it back. So that's where he's given the spare man up.
Yeah.
So everyone else is pressing, but he's left his man, and now they have a spare man. So that press, they only have one chance at the press. So we thought the tactics of Tyrone are changing, that they're pressing all over the field. But while he's on the field, they can only do that once. Right? So their actual new tactics of manning up right around the field is a waste of time because there's a free man spare floating around because he's just left his man, turned his back to the play and ran back. Yeah. That's okay with their old tactics, but it's not okay with their new tactics. Do you get my point?
Yeah, well look, the game is unbelievably fluid. So players are left with loads of these on-pitch decisions that they have to make at a given time, and it can't be like, not every single scenario can be dealt with in pre-match briefings or in training or anything. Like, players have to be able to make good decisions, but as a collective you have to have some sort of a cohesion or a philosophy as to how you want to play the game. And you can't, you know, there is going to be a mix, of course, at times in a game where you can see what's happening. You maybe have one player with the opposition isolated and you can get 2 or 3 bodies. You have to press. If it's one player on your team and there's 2 or 3 lads spare, there's no point in him wasting his energy going from one man to the next one. But someone on the team needs to give him a shout, someone that can see it, or you recognise what's happening yourself and just say, okay, there's no point here, I can drop off and I can reset to a different zone. But I would say that where Tyrone are slightly getting caught, well, look, it happened the other day, it doesn't happen to them every day, but if it's a pattern that repeats itself, they're not going to get much success. And that's where you're pressing high to a certain point, and then you leave this massive gap, you know, just outside the press where nobody's really manned up on somebody, and it's an easy out ball for the opposition. It's just a pop pass over your head and it takes 6 or 8 men out of the game. And that's only done because a number of your players step back into a defensive position as opposed to being tight on their man and not giving the opposition that easy out ball.
Yeah, no, it's completely, no, you're completely right. I don't know, I think he'll change it. I think bringing him off yesterday, that's a huge, now he could be injured. I would prefer if he wasn't injured, because then you would say Mickey Hart's tired of this now. You know what I mean? When he wanted to go win the game, he knew that wasn't going to work. Kyle Coney came on for him. There was clearly a reshuffle, and they won 1-5 to a point.
Yeah, well, like the thing about it is, Cavanagh has generally speaking makes good defensive decisions, and he has missed a lot of football, so you can take it with a pinch of salt on one game that maybe he just didn't have it in the legs, and then he wasn't able to do that press for long enough, so he went off, and maybe he was dropping off because he couldn't physically do it. But
I'm not saying to drop Cavanagh now. Cavanagh's a very smart player. I'd say keep Cavanagh, but tell him to stop doing that. That you mark your man now. We don't need that zonal thing from you anymore.
And there will be a time when he will have to drop back into that position, but it's not too early in the attack. Like, there's times when you can spot the danger, and you can, like, if you're playing, you played there, Wooly, for a long time as a half forward, and you're kind of drifting back with the play. But if the attack is going down the opposite wing, you can sometimes make that hard run and get back in front of your full back line for where you can cut out a diagonal ball. Yeah. Now that's the time to go back. That's the time where you can leave your man, because even if you make that run and the ball doesn't get kicked in, that the opposition see you and say, oh feck, we can't kick it in, he's covered that, and it gets back out recycled, you still have time to push back out. Now it's demands a huge amount of energy, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but nonetheless that's still how you engage the opposition more effectively.
You'd get back out to that spare man. Yeah, that's what he's not doing.
It's like they call it a seesaw. Like you press when it's on that wing, and on the other side it goes back, and then when it comes over to the other wing, they push up, and the other side pushes back, and covers up.
Hopefully he'll change. Hopefully he'll change it back, because like I said, it's definitely gone outdated. I'll just finish up on this quote from Damien Mackerlane. Mackerlane, is it? I don't think I've ever even said his name before. Would you believe that? He said, all the patronising before the game was hard to listen to, so I'm glad we came out and delivered a performance. We're pleased with the performance, disappointed that it was 6 in the end. We didn't feel like it was a 6-point game. That's the ruthless end of it, and a gap we have to bridge, I suppose. A little bit of fighting talk, because I always see Damien Mackerlane and I'm thinking, what's he all about, that fella? Do you know what I mean? I've never read anything interesting for him. He's just seemed meh, but like at least he come out and at least showed a bit of gumption. Do you know? I think like your manager's your leader as well at the same time, and he sets the tone of it, and I didn't see much tone coming out of him before that.
Yeah, it's a bit patronising though, isn't it? Celebrating a 6-point loss as well.
Maybe that's patronising as well, yeah. Okay, right, we'll leave it there. We'll be back with Paddy Power performance of the weekend. Paddy Power performance the weekend. We have to start with Colm McShane, lads, because we've eulogised about this lad during the league, but he keeps delivering off right and left. Some of his points were outstanding. The first point was a brilliant ball by Richie Donnelly. Matty Donnelly made the run. Chris McKay had to come out and engage him. He gave it to his brother. Beautiful diagonal ball point. Hampsey gave him a lovely ball over the top. Rogers, in fairness, didn't know whether he was coming or going. He tried to mark him from the front. Hampsey got him over the top. He tried to mark him from behind or giving him diagonal balls. And towards the end, remember the point he got at the end, which was outside? That was just a basic straight down the wing ball. But Rogers was all over the place now, where he's so disheartened that he wasn't sure whether to go with him or what to do, because they had him bamboozled. Because if you were playing diagonal balls in front, that's impossible to mark. If you try to come out the front to cut that off, it's going over your head. Now where do you stand? And what are you saying to Chrissy McCaig about helping him? He scored off the left, he scored off the right, he scored a hand pass goal. He's a sensational player. It's turned, like, without him yesterday, it's fair to say Tyrone didn't have much outside of Michael Cassidy, who'd scored 2 outstanding points from play as well. 2 off the right, but both from one from either side to show a full array for a wing back off different angles. He's another nomination. But those two, I thought McShane, it's crazy how dependent Tyrone are on him now.
Yeah, look, really good. He's a good physical presence, but he's got great mobility as well. His movement has improved hugely. But I suppose that just comes from being bedded in there and playing in the position a bit more regularly. But his movement was good. He was drifting in behind Rogers. He'd dart left, he'd dart right, he'd come out and show in front. So, and Rogers, I suppose, is always aware of the threat for a ball being delivered in, we'll call it, say, 50-50, or, you know, a ball in the air, which McShane is well fit to compete for. So Rogers, you know, he's as a fullback, you'd be afraid to play too far in front because you know the threat is available over the top. So that means you're maybe playing a little bit more conservative, and he's trying to mark him maybe shoulder to shoulder or slightly from behind, and McShane then has the pace and strength to hold him off. So
yeah.
and he can shoot off both feet, which any good forward really should be able to do.
They should, but I didn't think he could, because I thought he was kind of a midfielder, he wing forward. I've never seen Brendan Rodgers get taken to cleaners like that, Conan. Have you? 4 from playing the first half alone, and he was all over the place.
Never. Like, honestly, I've rarely seen somebody getting the better of Brendan Rodgers for a whole game. Like, and it is just what you're saying. It can come. The ball's coming from any angle and any way, but also, like, McShane's willing to sort of go anyway for it. He can come out short, go in behind, or get the diagonal as well. So yeah. I don't know how you even begin to mark that.
And he didn't go forward much either. We didn't see any runs really until towards the end from Rodgers, which was a way Rodgers always have of kind of putting his the forward on the back foot. Maybe it was a bit too much respect for McShane or something.
I think in the second half, it was important to driving Derry out. He broke a few tackles and sort of started attacks. And I think, in fairness, McFall and Lynn were so good for Derry that Rodgers, once he broke the first line, he was popping it off to those two who were breaking another tackle. Yeah, with Cassidy, obviously.
Yeah, Lynn was very good, and he was very good in the league final as well. What age is Lynn? Because he gets taken off, and it doesn't look like me like he's any great size.
He's 31 now. Yeah.
So why is he getting taken off? Like, I mean, he was the best Derry forward on. Well, McGuigan was excellent
he was
too.
The same actually in the league final. He was the best player, and he was taken off.
Taken off very early in that game. So I'm thinking, is Lynn 31, and the manager's taking you off, thinking you can't finish out the game. Now don't get me started on that. Enda Lynn's another one. Boys, I know we didn't see this game, but Ian Corbett from Limerick, 1-2 from centre back. Isn't there something? Now, this lad has serious pace and fire in his belly. Like,
good size as well.
A good size of a man bombing forward. There's something I love about seeing a number 6 bombing forward. I mean, maybe it's a traditionalist in me and thinking of Kevin Moran and all those great kind of centre backs, but there's something. Why can't a centre back just come on? You know, because your centre forward's dropping into midfield and you're given a spare role. Most of them choose to use it to cover. Ian Corbett ain't doing that. Well, maybe he did a bit of covering, but like, I mean, his goal was top quality, and it's just, I'd say Ian Corbett's the type of player we need to see more. I need to see more from him. He does nothing at a walking pace. Everything is coming on to the ball, you know what I mean, at electrifying pace.
I think that the best sixes should know when to go and when to stay, right? And that's they've probably become a bit lazy or comfortable over the years. Like, they're supposed to be, I always thought 6 was your most important player. I always thought your half-back line and your full forward line, that's where you won and lost a game. And that was because the number 6 knew when to hold and when to go and dictate play. 6 was usually your best footballer, but now it seems to be your best stopper.
Tom Kelly transformed our season in 2003 from just, Jesus Christ, he was so reckless the way he just took off, and because he used to play in the forwards, he was incredibly accurate, and he was eye-catching. Teams didn't know what to do with him, coming onto the ball at pace, and it was a huge weapon. And he'd started the year with us as cornerback right through the league, and I think even the first round of the championship, then got converted, and whatever clicked in his brain, he just went, I'm just going forward here. You can't beat it. Like, and even in the modern game then as well, when you need those players coming off the shoulder, maybe around the 45, for a big man like Corbett to be able to break that line. You see when Matty Donnelly can break a tackle, then the sweeper has to come out to him. There's all these things, like, because if everyone's pairing off, never mind Tyrone giving you the extra man, but if you can break through a tackle at pace, now you're bearing down on someone who has to come to you, and there's all those, extra benefits from that. So yeah, Ian Corbett definitely looks like an exciting player. Owen Carroll impressed you, Cian. Was it him got that big huge one off the outside of the left in the second half? That was Owen.
Yeah, he got a great score off his right as well, from probably around the similar range, around the 45 as well. So look, he just was a massive physical presence. He won a couple of frees as well, driving forward at the Meath defence. Massive powerhouse presence around the middle. He was getting plenty of good solid tackles in. He was driving forward, and he used the ball really well, and he topped it off with 2 brilliant scores. A very, very impressive performance from him. He was probably in terms of the overall 70 minutes, he was the dominant midfielder in a game where Brian Menton from Meath scored 2 from play, and both Offaly midfielders scored 2 from play. So
we'll share it around, lads. That's typical midfield, isn't it? Let's all play. Owen Cleary played very well for Clare. He's out centre forward. He's a lovely wand of a left foot. They're probably struggling. Tuberty's injured, and Caelan Sexton has gone to America, so they're down 2 of their starting forwards, which isn't ideal. So Cleary's out at centre forward. Plays most of his football in the corner, but he scored 6, 3 from play against a very defensive Waterford team, so he definitely deserves a mention. Shane Killoran, 2 goals for Roscommon from midfield. Now he's played in the forwards a lot, so Roscommon always struggles for midfielders, and Compton is in America with New York, so maybe this is needs must. He's played wing forward, and I've seen him pick corner forward as well. I was trying to find more information on him because his name didn't jump out at me, but obviously he's filling a void. There's nothing I love more than an attacking midfielder anyways, because like we said, midfielders don't like to mark each other. Colm Cavanagh is the greatest example I can think. Jack O'Shea, great. But Jack O'Shea was a box to box, but Colm Cavanagh wasn't a box to box. He was midfield to the forward.
He was a 7th forward.
He was a 7th forward. And when you he's marking someone like Darragh O'Shea, or who's a traditional midfielder, you're not following him all the time, are you? That's the reality. I'd always play one fetching midfielder and a forward beside him, with a bit of a wing forward maybe in midfield. I think that's the best dynamic in midfield. James Califf for Louth scored 5 from midfield. 2 frees, 3 from play. 1 was an absolute screamer in the second half. They showed that on the Sunday game, which was a brilliant score. Fair play to him for that. So who do we think we'll give it to? Michael Cassidy as well. Remember Cassidy, we talked about him in the league where he was giving in a couple of bombs into McShane against Galway when he caught them. He has a bit of size about him. I didn't realise he could clip points like he did, because there's a huge technique difference between bending it over from your traditional good side and then flicking it over on the run from the other side. Yeah. So to see a wing back doing that's top level point scoring. You know what I mean? So this lad looks to be a serious weapon going forward. Yeah,
I would have added Richie Donnelly in there as well.
He was excellent.
Big game. And then obviously he had that lovely little flick down for Burns for the goal eventually. Then the restart of Derry's goal. And
he scored 2 brilliant points in the first half. The second one was a lovely, beautifully curled effort, and he above anyone else gives beautiful ball to McShane. He and that was a disappointing thing. He was given most of it. Sludden and Peter Hart were the 2 against Dublin that were given the lovely little diagonal balls, and they didn't give any of them yesterday. Sludden was taken off early. Now it's not like Sludden not to be in a game, but maybe it was just the amount of bodies Derry had back. It was hard for these lads to get into it. We might give them a pass.
Yeah, look, they had quiet games, but they usually handle a lot of ball. Look, we'd put it down to an off day for them.
An off day and the Derry tactics. Right, Colm McShane is the performance of the weekend. Just nudging out Ian Corbett on the basis that I saw Colm McShane playing, and Ian Corbett could have been not marking his man for the rest of the game other than the 3 scores that I saw. So Colm McShane wins Paddy Power performance of the weekend. So congratulations to him. It's his first Paddy Power, lucky pants. I'm sure it won't be the last over the summer the way he's playing. And that's all we've time for today. So we'll be back on Thursday with a preview show as normal, and we'll talk to you then. Good luck.